What's up, guys? Today I'm going over the resurrection of Christ. I will go over a very short method to show how the disciples' original message was actually true. In debating historical claims, we must keep in mind the pieces of evidence we can use to show truth, to validate these claims. One way to go about this is through what we call testimonial evidence. For example, if we claim that Bob has stole from a locker, let's say John's locker, then what we need to confirm this is some type of physical evidence, like fingerprints and maybe belongings of the person, like John, in this hypothetical scenario. You would also hope to see evidence of eyewitnesses, of people who claim Bob was around John's locker at a specific time frame that shows consistently with, let's say, some camera evidence, perhaps. If we have 2 to 3 witnesses saying this kind of thing, and we have fingerprint data, this can help you to conclude what may have actually and truly happened. But is this enough evidence to go fully in? Some would say yes, but some would also argue perhaps not, because what if there was another proponent to this, like a person named Josh, hypothetically, who used Bob's fingerprint to put on his locker because he disliked Bob? And it's stuff like this where it can become a lot more difficult, but you would also have to have evidence that this person did not like Bob in the first place too. So with this current evidence that we have provided in this hypothetical scenario thus far, it's reasonable to conclude that Bob has committed the crime. Another thing we should look at is past behavior. Does Bob or Josh, let's say hypothetically, have any evidence in the past of stealing or causing any kinds of ruckus? These are things that we can continue to look at and show whether or not, if these people do have consistencies in the past of doing so, then this can show maybe perhaps it can shed more light on whether or not the person could or could not have done so. So how does any of this help to conclude about the claim that Jesus has risen from the dead? Well, we first can't go off just Paul and other eyewitnesses, is the whole point of what I'm using here. I would like to show that we can use other pieces of cooperation. So this argument is not merely an assumption philosophically, but used from more of a cooperationable piece, like the assumption that God exists, but we can use argumentations about God, like the cosmological, the Kalam cosmological, or the contingency, or the moral, and many other ones that show that God must exist. And if God does exist, then God could raise Jesus from the dead. So that's obviously using the first assumption, if you would like to call it that. Christians claim that God chose to be incarnate, to atone for the sins of the world. All humans have wronged God by failing to show gratitude or obedience to their Creator. Jesus provides reconciliation to God in His sacrifice, as predicted from Old Testament ideologies. Now to the big question: how can we show that Jesus really did rise from the dead? There's a few ways that people go about showing this. You would see people online like Mike Licona and perhaps Gary Habermas using what they call the minimal facts argument. And however that one can be good, I also think that one has some flaws. So I'm going to use a argument from Jonathan McLatchie and Lydia McGrew, which is what they call the maximal facts argument, which is what a lot of people find a little more persuasive, because it's not hinged on just a couple pieces of data, but a few other ones. So first we can show that the Bible is historically reliable. That's the first part. If you have questions on that specifically, I'll link another video in the comments or the description below, because I don't want to make this video too long. So we're gonna go off with this premise here, that we can show that the Bible is historically accurate. And if the Bible is a reliable source, we can then look at the possibilities of the claims made. Either these all, the disciples specifically, either they have lied and made it all up, or another option could be that they were just simply mistaken. And then the final option would be that they actually did tell the truth. This is the same approach we'd use for a rape claim or a murder claim or any of the types of claims that we see here. We can see the incentives of how people go about this. So when looking at the Gospels, it's hard to show that they were simply mistaken, maybe like a hallucinatory type of event, because they claim to physically be with Jesus for up to 40 days, eating with him, drinking with him, physically touching him, and many more types of these stories. We obviously know this can be a little weird for people that don't really believe in supernatural ideologies, because Jesus had like what Christians call a glorified body. So like, yes, he was physical, but at the same time he was spiritual. So like he wasn't just physically walking around Nazareth, because then everybody would be a Christian. So like, you know, everybody would believe that he had truly risen from the dead, but it wasn't quite like that. He was appearing to specific individuals to show the message. So the first thing we can conclude, though, is that how could a group of people hallucinate for up to 40 days in a row? Now, perhaps you would say, oh, well, maybe it was drugs. Maybe these people were on some hardcore psychedelics and whatnot. And as persuasive as you think that may be, the only problem I would say with that is that the Jewish law, Jewish traditions, were very, very against any type of drug or any types of substance types of uses. Staying very sober was a very Jewish thing, and obviously Christians came from Judaism, so we don't see any reason to believe any of that. So if you continue to look at these things, we see Paul say Jesus is the first fruits of the dead, meaning that Christ is the fulfillment of what we call the first fruits feast in the Old Testament book of Leviticus. I think it's chapter 23 specifically. Well, maybe another option is that they were just simply lying. Well, again, it's unlikely. Think about this. Would you die for something you know for an absolute is false? Not believe, but know. In doing so, they were persecuted for hundreds of years before Constantine obviously took over and made it legal. And obviously they were hated for many reasons. Many of them were homeless, and they traveled to areas to spread the word of Christ. Again, they were very poor, and they gained literally no thing for any of these things that they were doing or believing. Many object here and say that, well, Muslims also die for their beliefs, like 9/11, for example. However, this is a very big difference. Why? Well, because Muslims today do not and did not know Muhammad was right. For example, they weren't there to confirm Muhammad. They just simply believe because of a message. Now, maybe you could say maybe they have good evidence, you know, if you're a Muslim watching, perhaps. But what I'm trying to state here is that there's a difference, because the original disciples were in an exclusive scenario to know whether or not Jesus really rose from the dead or not. As in, if they claimed to have physically seen him, or they lied, they are in a position to know whether or not this claim was true, if they were making it up. And the crazy thing is they never swayed away from the original story given 2,000 years ago, in which we all talk about today. And we know that these types of things happen for around 3 reasons. When people are making these kinds of concepts, like if you see people online claiming something, usually you can suspect it in this way. If someone claims something astronomical in such a sense, it's usually for either A, sex, B, money, or C, power, or just a combination of the 3 things. However, if you look at early disciples and Christians, none of them had any women, none of them had any money, and they certainly didn't have any power. So what did they gain by doing this? I can't see that being simply a alternative explanation. Now, some go into what we call like theories of like the stolen body one, and I'm not going to go into all of them. Perhaps some call the swoon theory, which is the idea that Jesus did not truly die, which is quite ridiculous. We have so much evidence that Jesus truly died when looking at the accounts. No historical scholar of any sense actually believes that. So the best conclusion is that Jesus actually did rise from the dead, that the disciples were telling the truth. But thank you for watching, and let me know what you guys think in the comment sections below.